sabroso, se baila clave de ritmo.
Hi, hello, and welcome to yet another episode of Portrait Mode. Back after almost a year, and this is an episode that I couldn't help record and putting out there, and I'll tell you shortly why. If I ask you to just close your eyes and think about picturing Indian football, you would probably think of Sunil Chhetri with folded hands coming on screen on his social media handles and pleading you and me to come to the stadium and watch him and the men in blue play a match in the Indian blue colors, right? Just to show up and show that support. Or you would think of the video from 2 days back from again Sunil Chetri and the other players like Sandesh Jingran, etc. Gurpreet, all of them coming on screen and pleading to FIFA to intervene and do something about this current crisis in Indian football, right? Cut to scene from some 60, 70 years back. Let's switch to 1962. Stadium in Jakarta, Indonesia. India isn't just participating, it's being roared on by about 1 lakh fans in the stands as it is absolutely destroying South Korea. And India ends up winning the Asian Games gold, right? Like this wasn't a fluke. In fact, India was known as the Brazil of Asia, and under the architect Rahim Saab Syed Abdul Rahim, famously portrayed by Ajay Devgan in the movie Maidan a few years back, he was not just a coach, he was a visionary CEO. The way he was running Indian football and how he implemented the 4-2-4 formation, which destroyed the opponents of India back then in mid 50s, 60s. Brazil, the five-time world champion, used it for the first time. In fact, picking up this particular tactic and deploying it in their first World Cup win in 1958. And if you notice, India was always very, very strong at the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, where football was, in fact, as good and as at a strong pedestal as, let's say, the FIFA World Cup back then, right? Now, of course, the Olympics football event is nowhere close in terms of stature to the FIFA World Cup event. But back then, India was a creditable participant, and in fact, they finished fourth at the 1956 Olympics as well. That's I think again a massive, massive space that we were in. Today, we struggle to qualify for the Asia Cup as well, right? So, what is this episode all about? I think I want to talk about the fact that greatness, in fact, was in our DNA. This was a mistake that didn't happen yesterday. This is about a market leader, and make no mistake, Indian football was a market leader in the landscape of global football in the game. Uh, uh, and it has just like completely deteriorated since then. The market leader quietly went bankrupt year after year, decade after decade, while honestly nobody was watching or taking accountability for it, right? So like I said, the decline didn't happen overnight, right? Like it happened by design. And as happens with brands, and I do understand a little bit about that world of brands and marketing, that when a great brand declines, they doesn't collapse in just a day or a few months or even 1 year. A brand gets eroded when they stop modernizing, and that's exactly what happened with Indian football. If you look at this graph, and I like to tell stories with graphs, back in 1970, India's global ranking, the FIFA ranking, was way higher than three of its peers in Asia, in this continent: Japan, South Korea, and Saudi Arabia, right? They were definitely significantly worse in terms of rankings than us. Cut to what happens since then in the next 20, 30, 40 years. Japan launches J League in 1992, not just as a weekend hobby project like how India has always treated its football, but like a 50-year product roadmap. That's how a company builds an organization and a ecosystem for the future and not just for the present day. And of course, that had great outcomes. Japan ended up being a World Cup regular like it is today, and it's almost always a surefire quarter finalist at the World Cup. And they do not just participate; they actually give a great run up for money to the biggies, the European biggies, and the LATAM players as well. South Korea, in fact, they ended up a little controversially. They ended up being the semi-finalist in the 2002 home World Cup edition, and they also have been extremely good as well. Look at their players now going toe to toe, shoulder to shoulder with all the other European giants as well. Saudi Arabia, yes, okay, not as good as Japan or South Korea, but make no mistake, they also have ended up having a great league right now, and they're completely reinventing the football model, and they've started attracting talent at the peak of their prime. Cristiano Ronaldo, of course, comes to my mind. And not just that, they have the rights for the 2034 World Cup. God knows what they will do. They ended up, let's not forget, beating Argentina, the eventual winners at Qatar 2022. So, yep. Now, this decline clearly for India, which has, if you notice this graph, the ranking has remained stagnant between 100 and 120 roughly. It has not been a single canon event, so to say. It has been a slow erosion, and that's the worst of erosions for a brand or an organization, right? Like, and I'm going to drop one more data here, and this is really staggering. The probably the most damning stat in Indian football. India as an overall country has just 14 pro licensed coaches. Compare that to something like Iran, a nation with a similar footballing start and history as India had. Iran has 139 pro licensed coaches today. Don't even ask me about Japan, which has thousands of them. So imagine, like, with this data, 14 pro licensed coaches in a market like India, imagine trying to build a tech unicorn with 14 senior engineers for a population that you want to cater to, which is 1.4 billion. That's not ambition. That is, as Gen Z would like to call it, delulu, right? And that's what we have been operating within in the Indian football ecosystem, right? Complete resistance to sports science. There is no consistent philosophy being followed. We blindly aped the uh, fad of having Spanish coaches, and we started importing some not so good Spanish coaches. 40 different coaches in 40 years since Rahim Saab. That is incredibly inconsistent and not first principle led ways of running the sport in the country. And absolutely embarrassing truths like 7 times being unable to even send a team to the World Cup qualifiers, right? Like, that's how bad things have got to. The talent didn't disappear. Like, I think the overall translation systems did, and that you can see clearly in this fractured ecosystem on screen here. The Indian Super League that was launched with a lot of fanfare in early 2010s brought glamour. The broadcast quality had definitely improved as compared to how the broadcast used to happen with the Doordarshans and Neo Sports broadcasting the erstwhile, let's say, the National Football League or the I League to our homes. Uh, some celebrity involvement happened, with which, of course, came some visibility. Some players who had great track record in Europe, Latin America, they started also coming in, obviously much past their prime, and they started hobnobbing and playing with the Indian players. So there was some short term good for sure, and that mattered. But beneath all this hood of this glitzy so called packaging, the engine was broken. And then again, I can say, someone who understands something about products, etc., that was a formula which was always going to implode, which has just happened right now. And again, let the data do the talking, right? Like, 11 out of the 12 ISL clubs today are loss making, and the overall collective debt, in fact, has increased by 212% in this last 6 years. That is incredibly inefficient and terrible way of managing the sport. And this was again a startling stat for me, that the ISL players, they in fact play only 22 to 25 matches per season versus the global average of 40 to 50. How will they compete, tell me? Like, I cannot, for example, wake up this morning and say, okay, I'm jogging, I'm going to jog for like 2 kilometers for next 1 week and then run a full marathon, right? Like, how do you even compete? The ecosystem today is clearly between the different so-called tiers and youth academies. It's a fractured house between AIFF, the commercial partner, whoever it was earlier, and whoever it's going to be. Everyone is pulling in different directions. जैसे बोलते हैं ना, हाथी का पूंछ. That's what's happening. They're looking at with their tunnel vision, and nobody's like really looking at the forest, and everyone is just looking at the trees. So when players now publicly then ask FIFA to intervene in this fractured ecosystem, I think what is happening is this has stopped being a management issue now. It has become an existential one. And then this was, of course, even more compounded by the zero bids that came in for the ISL commercial rights tender 2 years back, one year back. Completely flawed so-called financial model. The tender demanded almost 40 crore annual fee with no loss mitigation for the operator, and that obviously will scare away from some of the bidders, including the incumbent FSDL, who did submit a bid, and also Zerodha, brands like Zerodha, etc. Tell me, why would a brand like that come in an environment like this, right? The relationship between the federation and commercial partners have, of course, had not seen too much of collaboration, and clearly ego was the one that was taking the forefront here. So and this existential crisis that we are having, and I just don't want to just continue talking about the problem, but I wanted to put some data backed light on what is the scenario now. I wanted to also propose a probable solution as to what can happen from here, because you cannot just go any lower from here, right? Like at best, this crisis that is spreading, this is the worst of Indian football. The only way up is actually up, right? So if I were the, let's say, the decision maker, the CEO or CMO of Indian football, what would I do? Right, I think I would just go beyond the emotional take and then first design an ecosystem that is a complete alignment between the uh, mutual exclusive and exhaustive stakeholders that are out there. So this current fractured house that exists between the clubs, fans, AIFF, FSDL, the financial partner, etc., they have to come together, they have to get unified, and that's the first thing that they need to align on, which today is completely amiss. Even considering the temporary announcement that has happened, that I think the government has come in and told the IFF that okay, and I think IFF has sort of come into a middle path with the clubs. Both of them have come together. They're going to start the ISL in mid-February. That's the target as of this morning. But that's a temporary solution at best. What I'm going to propose is a three-pillar approach that needs to come in to kill the ego and unify the product, right? And the first step in that is going into the labs and investing in the R&D of football, which is nothing but youth and coaching. We have to stop obsessing over the senior team's inability to have a higher rank. We have to first start obsessing on the right metric, which is the youth and the foundation, which is the under 13, under 15, under 17. Right, look at what cricket does extremely well under Jagmohan Dalmia 25 years back. They started that program to go in the satellite metros beyond the conventional cricket strength centers that unlock the likes of MS Dhoni, Ranchi, etc. And that's why Jharkhand today wins a Syed Mushtaq Ali trophy, and Bombay doesn't continue winning the Ranji for like years after year, right? And that has actually helped India become the global sport, which it's not just backed by revenue, but actually backed by on-ground performance, which is also backed by the talent pipeline that it has created. How can it happen in football? I think two, three clues. One, I said that you have to focus more on the under 13, under 15, and under 17 by creating a consistent development pathway. Second is you have to launch a national coaching program, right? Coaching target, if you're at 14 pro license coaches today, which is abysmally low, first set a target of having at least 100 plus pro license coaches by 2030 in the next 5 years. No nation stumbles into footballing excellence, they engineer it. And I think one of our greatest strengths as a country is the digital infra that we have. Why are we not using a digital talent ID pipeline for football? If you check the papers intently yesterday, you would have seen for the women's premier league in cricket, there was a call to action for the potential fast bowlers, young fast bowlers who are potential women cricketers. They can straight away scan a QR code, submit their fast bowling videos, and probably get spotted by the scouts of the different WPL teams and come straight to the stadium and probably get seen, right? What a beautiful fast tracked mechanism to get noticed. Why can't we use a digital talent ID pipeline for football like that? I see every nook and corner, the state and the city that I stay in, or wherever I have been, there is always some afternoon football, no matter what time of the year it is, right? And where it be from Andaman or Punjab, wherever, how can we identify and nurture talent at young age, and efficiently so, using one of our biggest strengths as a nation, which is digital talent ID, right? So how can we do that? That's something I want to leave as a thought. Then second, I think I talked about unification of the product. That's exactly what you see on screen. One pyramid, three tiered structure within which promotion and relegation is restored. No parallel leagues pretending to be ecosystems. Promotion and relegation are not just drama devices, they are accountability mechanisms of a good efficient footballing ecosystem, and that has to be there, right? Second, not a shortened window of a footballing calendar, a 10-month football calendar mandating a 30 plus match league season for the top two tiers to build a proper elite player level stamina, right? Like so that we are able to compete with the best in the world, right? And that has to be the goal for us to go back to that leadership position that we had years back. And that, I think, was in fact advocated by some of our better coaches over the last few years as well. And the other thing I want to also call out is, of course, the importance of financial fair play, and that needs to come in if the repetition of what is happening right now is to be avoided, right? And which would also mean the creation of a stakeholder council where clubs and players have real votes and not just ceremonial ones which nobody actually takes into account. I don't know, some of these administrators, they seem to be administrators, but what are they actually pulling off? I don't know if, and why did how did we get to the situation if they were doing their job which they're supposed to do? How do we then have full financial transparency? And yes, one extremely important point is opening the door to talent of a certain kind which we need, which is a little controversial but necessary at this point, which is the OCI route. We have to open up the OCI cardholder route for allowing them to come in and actually follow the model that has been followed by the likes of some countries like Morocco, Philippines, etc. We do have Indian origin talent playing somewhere in Europe. How do we call them in? Why are we refusing to use them? Because of some archaic policy which was drafted, and in fact which was one of the reasons why we have continued to languish like where we are. This isn't selling out, it's just buying time while your domestic pipeline matures and gets corrected from ground up with the root cause analysis that I just showed you. OCI has to be opened up, and that has to happen. One wild card opportunity that I want to call out is the one in women's football. Again, data led, absolute opportunity staring in our faces. The men's FIFA ranking is 117. The one for women's is 61. And in fact, the women's team is ranked 12th in Asia, right? Compared to, I think, 19 for the men's team. What I want to call out is, if Indian football wants a World Cup qualification in my generation's lifetime, it is more likely to come from the women's team and not men's, right? So we need to back this franchise like our life depends on it, like it's yesterday. And we need to again have dedicated investments, much like what BCCI did beautifully in the last 4 or 5 years, and look at the result that has happened. And that's why we lifted the World Cup after years of trying. Again, we have to start today so that it happens at some point. The women's team was at it for a long time, hustling through, and finally they saw the glitter of the World Cup, right? So a dedicated and proportional investment in Indian women's football is what I'm calling out. Yes, so I want to end with this, that we looked at the past. The past was definitely proven possibility. We had a glittering past and we declined. I think the only way is up, and want to end it on a positive note that the future needs architecture. So to all the stakeholders out there, I want to tell you that the decline wasn't accidental. It was a failure of design, and we have to solve it from a design angle and not just tactically a part of the problem, right? And 1962, to begin the analogy and the anecdote I began this pod with, showed that football is in our DNA, right? And I see it on the streets. I see it in the passion with which we follow this game as the fans, and our passion is the lifeblood. And that was never the problem. I think the architecture and the design was, and which we need to solve for. So whether it be the IFF, the club owners, the potential investors, the government, or the fans, us, I am asking all of us to demand better from the system and support, to call out, do whatever you can, put it out there. And I think that's the least we can do to give this sport its due in this magnificent country that we live in. Let's stop living in the past and start building for the future. This was Portrait Mode. This was my take on the current state of Indian football. I'll tell you the trigger for why I wanted to do this. A close friend of mine from the media circles, Juan Arango, he's based out of Latin America. He was making his voice heard on his social media handles over the past few days. And the only stake he has no commercial stake in the sport in the country. He's a big fan of the sport. Professionally, he's a commentator largely in the Latin American leagues, etc., and European leagues. He did one stint in the Indian, Super League ecosystem couple of years back or whatever last year, and he felt the passion. Everyone who comes to India and sees the things up close operationally will always feel the passion, and he has been voicing his, opinion on this, that why is XYZ not doing this and whatever, and that really moved me. That what am I doing, like, while staying confined in my room? At the least I can do to save Indian football using the hashtag lingo that's going out there right now is to put something out there using whatever little intelligence that I have, and little bit of data crunching that I could do. And I think this is a little manifestation and a hope of a butterfly effect being put out there, that it does its little bit to probably reach the ears of someone, maybe, I don't know, a potential investor who has a few crores to spend on some sporting IP. And make no mistake, we brand owners, we keep on investing in sporting IPs, figuring out some ROI in the process. Why not back something like this? What a great resurrection story, to bring this sport in this country back to the glory days that it once had, right? Or potentially maybe fans like us who follow the same European clubs all day long with the same passion. Somewhere deep down, we have those nostalgic connections with these clubs and this piece as well. And we want India to do well, but we always think that this goal is too far ahead of us to even have a realistic estimate. And it's always a butt of all jokes and memes, Indian football. Why should it all be like that, right? Like, so this is a little effort towards that objective, and hope it does its job.
Qué ricos son, sabrosos,